Hi everybody. I gotta remember to check the focus, so hold on. Check the focus here. Make sure we're good. That looks pretty good. Alright. So, let us then, kind of as promised, I wanted to talk about featured emotions. These are from previous semesters. I haven't done one for this semester. We probably would have talked about it as time is now. I don't really feel I have the resources to put together another emotion. Ooh, wouldn't that be a good extra credit assignment? What should be the featured emotion for, let's say, the fall version of this class? Alright, let me think on that. So I distract myself pretty easily, obviously, but you're used to that. So we're going to talk about hope as a featured emotion. We'll also talk about hatred. Actually, hatred I think comes before. Hatred would be 8.25. This is 8.26. And this was featured for spring 2019, and this was a request of our fellow Buckeyes. They said, we're talking so much negative crap, can you do anything nice? And I admit I have a negativity bias in a lot of what we do. So let's talk about hope. And I think a great place to start when we talk about hope is President Obama's book, The Audacity of Hope. And I remember when President Obama was initially putting his candidacy forward, my wife and I got the book. We wanted to read what President Obama had to say in his own words. And it's an interesting book. I was left saying, well, it's a great read. It makes one feel good. Maybe a little short on detail, but then it wasn't necessarily about that. It was about a value system. So, and I can be a critical reader about anything I read. So, but let's look at President Obama's own words. Hope is not blind optimism. It's not ignoring the enormity of the task ahead or the roadblocks that stand in our path. It's not sitting on the sidelines or shirking from a fight. Hope is the thing inside us that insists, despite all evidence to the contrary, that something better awaits us if we have the courage to reach for it, to work for it, and to fight for it. Hope is a belief that destiny will not be written for us, but by us. By the men and women who are not content to settle for the world as it is, who have the courage to remake the world as it should be. Now, that's a pretty profound statement. And I think that President Obama, in the definition of hope, he's kind of hit all the right buttons or checked all the right boxes in kind of expressing the definition of hope. Let's see if we're going to go through and look at some definitions of hope, empirically inspired, theoretically inspired, and see where we go. Before we do that, I want to share this picture. Because I troll the internet for pictures all the time to augment our lectures. And this picture here of this young woman, I'm assuming it's in a rail car by the looks of it, with her dog, her little dog. She's traveling somewhere. She's got kind of a wistful look, if you will, and she's got that package in her lap. And to me, I think she has hopes for where she's going and what's going to happen there. Maybe as an illustration of that. So, and then we look at how hope is captured. If you Google the word hope and images, which is something I often do to kind of supplant lectures, what do we see? We often see hope associated with rays of light, right? And or hope with seeds sprouting, young plants. So we have these rays of light, right? Or the seeds sprouting in this rocky environment with the clouds and the sky in the background, or the picture of the seedling growing out of what seems to be areas that are completely inhospitable to growth, right? So hope cliches and phrases then, as we see another image of the sun shining through the clouds, and we use these terms: ray of hope, glimmer of hope. It's always darkest before the dawn, right? And notice that these are light versus darkness often, kind of. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. And that was John Lennon's quote, right? Life's under no obligation to give us what we expect. And Margaret Mitchell. But we might hope that we get what we want, right? Although life isn't under an obligation. And I think this last statement by Margaret Mitchell kind of takes us where President Obama wanted us to go, that you're not going to achieve by sitting on the sidelines. You got to frickin' do something, right, in line with it. So let's then differentiate this idea of hope versus wish. Because notice, wishing is where I sit on the sideline and say, God, I wish this would happen. But I'm not necessarily doing anything to make it happen. And we know the metaphor for this is I find this lamp, right? And what do I do with this lamp? I polish this lamp and a genie pops out and grants my wishes, right? But notice that my interaction and my effort was minimal in this process, right? Maybe hope has something that requires a little more energy. So hope then is the desire to desire something good or positive in the future, right? It's often used to express a desire for an event, a situation, or an action in the future. In this case, be used with the present simple tense. I hope she gets better. I hope we see each other again. Or, God, I hope I pass my test. Right? Not that one is unfamiliar to you guys, right? And you can also, I took this from this blog. So now, wish, to desire something that's unlikely or impossible to happen. So wishes have a high probability then of not being fulfilled necessarily. It's used to express a desire for something, right, that's not real now. In this case, it'd be used with a simple past verb or conditional model. Examples. I wish I had a bigger house. Well, wish all you want, it's not going to change the size of your house or move you into a new one. I wish I didn't have a big test tomorrow. Well, guess what? The test has been scheduled. Wishing ain't going to change that, right? I wish I could learn English faster. Well, yeah, a lot of us wish. I wish I could play the piano, right? But I don't, and I haven't because I wasn't willing to put in the work, right? I wish I were taller, and there's a good one. I wish I were taller. And believe me, for someone who was, hit 5'8" in high school and been 5'8", well, bad news is now that I'm 62 years old, I've shrunk an inch, so I'm freaking 5'7". Yeah, I could wish I was taller till the cows came home. If you love that quote, right? It ain't gonna make a difference, right? So wishing is about shit that ain't likely to happen, and it implies minimal effort. Hope is a visionary comment that has the potential to be realized. So hope and wish, let's hope we've got those differentiated successfully. So hope is an emotion, support for Avril. And this is where I want to challenge you guys to think, what is an emotion? Because we've been discussing this throughout the class. What is not an emotion? How does it become included in the realm of being an emotion or not, right? Is hope an emotion? Is hope not an emotion? Okay, you learn what you learn, and then you come to some kind of stance on that. And the thing is, remember that as you learn more, your stance might change. So you might see hope as an emotion now and then learn at some point in the future, wow, I don't know if I really want to call it an emotion. Or you might not want to call it an emotion now, but you learn something that makes you believe that, in fact, maybe it is, right? So support for Avril in this question, the finding portrays hope as an emotion that occurs when an individual is focused on an important, positive future outcome. Okay? So... and notice the positivity part is put in there. You could even perhaps argue with that. The individual may see a positive outcome as somewhat unlikely and yet still expect it to occur. Thus, being hopeful enables people to maintain approach-related states, right? So if approach and avoidance are part of the context of emotion, then hope maybe has a leg up on being an emotion, despite their present inability to reach the desired outcome. So through hard work and more energy, more practice, more skill, my hope may be realized in that regard. So, but now I'm going to put it to you here that is hope a syndrome? And we haven't used this term a lot in class yet. I kind of been saving it, right? That basic emotions, when you talk about Ekman and you see something like disgust, remember I opened that dirty diaper, man, and I reel back, right? Most of us are going to kind of pretty clearly argue that is an emotion, as a response, visceral reaction to something that occurred in the environment. But when we begin to talk about what we might consider more complex emotions, or even beyond that, the complexity takes them up to the point of being a syndrome, that they're really multifaceted, they have multiple components to them, and the instigating causes and current experience, with memory, with goals, with motivations, then operate in kind of this syndromatic, if you will, kind of process that then delivers to us this experience of these complex experiences like hope, right? Or maybe it's a theory, maybe it's not what I said at all, maybe it's something that we describe in a more intellectual fashion, right, and has less of the visceral portion of it. So Rick Snyder has a lot to say about this, and we often look for someone, a theorist, who really kind of demonstrates a high level of clarity and thought in these ideas. So Snyder, let's go with him. Hope is a process, wow, of goal-directed thought that reflects both the belief one can find pathways to the goal, has the motivation based on one's perceived capabilities, self-efficacy, and or agency thinking, that they are agentic and a causal being in this regard. So when we talk from kind of this clinical perspective, where obviously hope could be in the forefront from a clinical thinker, therapy design focuses on cognitive behavior therapy, solution-focused therapy, and narrative therapy. So think about what we're talking about here. Cognitive behavior therapy is let's engage in actions and think in a way that supports hope. Or solution-focused therapy is not so much what's happened, but how do we move past what's happened to a new state, a preferred state, right? Which would be kind of that solution-focused. And then narrative therapy is what are the story we're telling ourselves about ourselves and our role in the world and the way the world works. And if we rewrite that narrative, can we perhaps then engender greater levels of hope in ourselves? So we can see where a syndrome might be more the case, right? That because of these multiple components. What do you say, Monica? Hey, sweetie. Yeah. Okay, so tenets of hope theory. Okay, high hope individuals is identified by a dispositional hope scale developed by Snyder. Yes. Psychologists develop scales for virtually everything, right? So we have regularly operationalized 3 types of thinking and behavior. So to the extent that hope is present, what do we see? We probably see a higher level of goals thinking. That's consistent emphasis focused on goals for the future. So, you know, I didn't wish to get a PhD. I busted my ass to get a PhD. And there were obstacles along the way, there were successes along the way, but it was goals thinking, right? That is up there, that is out there, right? And one of the reasons I got my PhD instead of stopping at my master's, might have been logical, is because I had begun teaching. And I began teaching at the beginning of my 3rd year, and I said, oh my God, I have to go on, I have to continue. I have to, because I want a PhD, because if I have a PhD I can teach at Ohio State. And the writing was on the wall that no, you won't be teaching with a master's degree at Ohio State, not at least in psychology, right? So the goal thinking, I got to get this PhD. The pathway, right, is belief in one's capacity to generate routes towards the goal. Can I get there? What do I need to do to get there? And the belief that you can in fact find a path that will lead you to your goal. And the agency thinking is the belief in one's capacity to initiate and sustain the actions. That is, and these are the smaller actions, like I need to write this paper, I can write this paper, I need to pass this class, I need to do this, that, or the other thing. So all of these then are the tenets of hope theory. Pretty clear, and you can see it's multifaceted. Is it simply an emotion? This is where it gets problematic, because I think when we get to this level of complexity in describing a phenomenon like hope, then we're moving away from a basic emotion at the very least to a complex emotion. If not a complex emotion, then I'm going to go to kind of syndrome. So you can see how those are kind of rank ordered there. So positive emotion maps then, positive emotion. What's the benefit of positive emotions? Well, that. So joy, right? Positive emotion can lead to gratitude and forgiveness. And how many of you practice some kind of form of gratitude on a daily basis? Wake up in the morning and say, I am thankful for, right? And demonstrate some level of gratitude. Awe, to be struck by something that just absorbs your attention, right? Savoring, we've talked about savoring and the Confucian form of savoring. That's included here as well. Love, right? And sharing good news is a portion of this. Managing the mood. To what extent are you the engineer of your own emotional experience? Do you expose yourself to humor and fun? Do you seek out triggers that trigger positive emotions and attempt to avoid triggers that in fact generate negative emotions? Right? And then the positive to negative ratio. Do you try to maintain it? I mean, at some point, I am a bit of a news junkie. I spend a lot of time on Twitter, and often it just drags you down and it makes you feel like shit, right? So you got to have a balance at some point, and you manage that. You say, no more Twitter today, you know, and sometimes that happens at 4 in the afternoon. No more of the shit. I don't want to see it because I can't take it anymore, right? There's only so many bitchin' cat pictures on Twitter. There's an awful lot of other stuff that is rather unpleasant, right? And at some point I just don't want to process it anymore. And see, hope and optimism, and you guys who took positive psychology, you know the link up of positive emotions to hope and optimism as described by Seligman. Right? So hope in the bigger scheme, right? So what are the components of hope then? Well, biological. Averill suggests that hope doesn't seem to have a biological correlate. If your theory of basic emotions that you're working on then ties them to biological kind of substrate, notice that hope is going to be a hard one for you to argue as a basic emotion. So, question. What physical phenomenon, to explore this further, then seems to accompany hope? And I'll leave that for you to consider. What is a similar state of motion that might have a biological component to hope, right? But hope doesn't, and it does. So maybe that's another way to look at it. It appears to be neither an automatic nor reflexive, so we don't necessarily just encounter stimuli and automatically have hope generated. So it might be more complicated than that. Cognitive. Hope can include or result from an appraisal process. In fact, it's hard to imagine hope devoid of any kind of appraisal. So it certainly puts it into the cognitive realm, at least a cognitively generated emotion. The learned social, linguistically, hope's a common word. I sure hope. But how is this different from wish? And we've kind of looked at linguistic aspects of emotions, and we'll continue to do so throughout the course. So there's another way to look at it, right? The plenty of cliches, proverbs, maxims we've learned to kind of tell us what hope is and what isn't, maybe successfully or not. Hope is a concept in many religions and religious experience. Oh, by the way, I'm reading this new book. I just started reading it yesterday. It's by Dr. Reese, who's an Ohio State alumnus, a professor emeritus, and it's called The 16 Strivings for God. And it looks like a relatively complex analysis of why people engage in worship and engage in religion. Fascinating, because most explanations have been kind of pretty simplified, one or two component, and he's going to suggest that there's 16 strivings for God. So I'm interested to see where that goes. I'm thinking of maybe incorporating some of that into Psych of Adjustment in the fall. We'll see how that goes. So, and if you're looking for a class in the fall, I would love to see it in Psych of Adjustment. Okay, Psych 3335. Eventually it's going to be renamed Psychology of Health and Well-Being. Right? So that's kind of the approach. And then the behavioral components of hope, right, is self-talk. You got this, you can do this, you know you got this, right? The choice of hope-inspiring activities, that is picking and choosing behaviors that generate hopeful outcomes or support hopeful pathways or goals, right? That behavioral component, as Snyder suggested. And then the motivational component. And maybe that's the biggest part of hope, is that hope motivates us to, in fact, engage in activities that bring us closer to that goal. And notice this is what President Obama was saying. He was saying, hey, you can't sit on the sidelines. It's an action. You have to take action to make this happen. So then how does this relate, or how does this kind of dovetail, then perceived control of the self-action? And the perceived control, right? This is, so the self as an agent. I'm an actor in this play called life, right? And through my experiences and through my beliefs about myself, then it develops my efficacy expectations, the extent to which I believe that I can engage in a certain action. And then what's important though, and this is very Vroom-like in organizational psychology, that Vroom described kind of a similar situation. The action means, will they generate the potential outcome, the end that I want? And to the extent they will, then that is the measure of control over my environment. So here I am, do I believe I can do it? And if I can do it, do I believe that those actions will generate the outcomes that I want? And if so, then I have a sense of personal control, right? And that's the level of perceived control. So pretty simple formula there. Believe it or not, this short lecture, that's got to be a two-parter, so I'm going to break here and we'll come straight back to part 2.